Hey everybody, back to just talk a little bit more about Tisas pistols. Maybe you've seen a version of a video I've made about this gun, but I've done some updates to it, and I'd like to at least kind of reintroduce the subject. Given that I made a video on how I worked on my Springfield mil-spec pistol and kind of did some tuning on it, I'd like to at least share this one. So what we have here started out as a Tisas GI model. Now, it's not really, at the time that I bought it, a historically accurate Tisas GI. It did have kind of the small little hump sights and the very low rear sight. It did not have the humped rear mainspring housing. It did have a very short trigger on it, but it did have a metal and straight rear mainspring housing here. And then, of course, a spike hammer and a lot of other sort of mil-spec type parts. So what I've done with this is, because this gun was so cheap, I've got it for under $400 out the door with tax and fees and everything like that at a gun show. The reason I bought this particular gun is that it had a really, really solid lockup. And so what we have here is that this gun had a great slide to frame fit from the factory, and that's what made this great. Now, this is a 9mm. A lot of people really want to buy the 45 ACP. The CMP models will be in 45 ACP, but the reason that I wanted a 9mm is that at the time I didn't have a 9mm 1911. I've had several, have had several different types of 1911 since then, but this one I've done an entire transformation on. And I'll briefly go over what some of the things are. Now, one of the important things about this is that, this is a 2021 model. And I believe as in 2022, Tisas started using tool steel for almost all their internal parts. So I believe that this pistol actually predates that. And I did a little research to make sure about that. So when I explain a lot of the things I've done on this pistol, be aware that Tisas did make a change to some of their policies and the way that they put stuff together, and that motivated a lot of me changing specific parts out in this gun that may not be so necessary to change out in your gun. If you really want to get into modifying 1911s, though, this is the way to go. The first thing you need to do whenever you buy a 1911 is ask to hand select. If you're going to a gun show, go ahead and grab the pistols, feel them, feel the slide to frame fit. Now, one of the ways that you'll do that is you can just, feel. Does the slide move back and forth in the frame? Does it have any hang-up spots? Like if you get to here, do you have to pull a little extra hard? So if it doesn't have anything like that, but it is still slightly tight and squeezes a little bit of oil out of the back, supposing there's some oil in it, that's a pretty good sign. That's just something to consider. And if you can find that, it doesn't really have significant amount of rattle, then, I don't think that that's going to be an issue. Now, generally, that's good. A lot of the other things inside of the pistol can be easily tuned, but those are some things that, unless it's too tight, that can be loosened up. But if it's too loose, that's really difficult to tighten up. And that's not something I would recommend doing on a $370 pistol. Anyways, what I've done on this gun is a few mods to start with. Now, one of the cool things about the way that Tisas builds their 9mm 1911s is that, unlike a 45 ACP pistol, here is my Les Baer monolith. And so what we have here is a straight barrel that just sits on top of a frame-mounted feed ramp. Now, Les Baer obviously makes some very nice pistols, and so, but even then, for their 45 pistols, they still use that style. Now, there are multiple different styles of feed ramps, and that actually changes some of the interior dimensions of the gun. But what Tisas has done is that they use a integrated ramp. And so the front of this ramp in this barrel is rounded, and they call that the Clark/Para ramp. Now, what is different about that is, if you look, this is my 1911 Colt. Now, this Colt 9mm actually has the same style as their 45 ACP. So this is very interesting in that this doesn't have that feed ramp. And if I wanted to have that integrated feed ramp, I would actually have to have the gun modified and then have the feed ramp fit. So Tisas already does that work for you when you get a 9mm 1911, which is really cool. The next thing I did was I went whole hog on making sure that once the frame, the barrel, everything looked pretty good, I was going to accurize and make sure that I did a lot of tuning on the pistol to make it fun. Now, what that does, when I say fun, that means to make the trigger feel good, to make it reliable, and to make it look good. And so this being a cheap pistol was a great one to start on because I like to modify these guns myself. So one of the first things I did was, of course, when you accurize, I did a barrel bushing. Now, in this one of the things that I've done is I have actually dug out and crowned this barrel because the exterior profile of the front of the barrel had this sort of rounded over look to it. And so I've crowned that. Now, I'm probably going to end up doing some more blending to get these all to run together at some point, but that's a future project. This is a custom EGW barrel bushing, of course, with the nose for the recoil spring plug. And so these match together, and they can be sanded or filed together if you want to. And so this is actually custom fit just for this barrel, and I had to do a little bit of barrel fitting, some sanding, some filing to make sure that all of these things work together well. But once it's very well set up, once the barrel link was all set up, and if you watch my video on the mil spec, you'll kind of see that running a barrel link or a series of barrel links to find out the best reliability and lockup with your barrel is going to be important because that's going to establish rock solid reliability. You can't have it too tall, you can't have it too short. So making sure that your barrel link is good is important. And in this case, this one really doesn't have any excessive flex at all. And so our barrel is locked in with a good tight bushing, a good tight barrel link. It has a nice lockup in the lugs up here. So effectively, we're in good shape with that. What I did, though, was also just make sure that I did a little polishing on the barrel throat and, of course, on the feed ramp to make sure that that looks good. And then what you want to do, naturally, when you go ahead and fill or install your new bushing, you're going to want to make sure that it is broken in by, cycling the slide. You can run some flits on that to make sure that at least some high points are worn a little bit lower so you don't have to worry about a long excessive break-in. But that really helps. What I've done then, on top of that, was I did a beaver tail conversion. Obviously, if you see the factory version of this gun as it came out, it had a standard non-beaver tail. I ordered the beaver tail safety from Wilson Combat. This is not the bulletproof. This is just the standard. But what I had done is that I went ahead and bought a jig from Wilson Combat. I took a file and I spent some time just wearing this down slowly. And then after some time, made sure that I blended the back of the frame with the edge of the beaver tail. Is it perfect? No. I went ahead and also sanded it to get as consistent of a finish as I could and make sure that I could get it fit so that it would fit this way. And I dug in here to make sure that there was some nice, integration. Honestly, like if you were to look at, this is the factory one from Colt, you can actually see how much space, and there's quite a bit of a lip under there. I haven't blended this gun. This is the factory grip safety on the Colt. And so a much more expensive gun. And then on the Tisas, though, I have actually blended this one myself. As I said, is it perfect? No way. But this is something I did myself. And so, it probably save several $100s from a gunsmith doing it. The next thing I did was a full internal workup on this gun. I ordered Wilson Combat entirely the new set of all the pins that go in this gun. And they're made of drill bit steel. So that includes the pins here for the safety, for the mainspring. That'll be for the sear, as well as a couple other pins. I also ordered a bulletproof, that's not this part, a bulletproof plunger tube assembly, which you might see in my video on the mil spec, I think is very important. And then I ordered a Wilson Combat sear I ordered a Wilson Combat bulletproof disconnector. Those are both bulletproof parts. I also made sure that I upgraded to a Wilson Combat spring, a sear spring back here. I found that's an important thing because I feel like they're a little bit easier to tune than the Tisas one. I went ahead and changed the springs out in this gun. This is a 19-pound hammer spring. This is, I believe, a 10 to 12-pound. I may have both. Recoil spring. In this case, it's not the Colt double spring set up. Of course, we wanted to make sure that the firing pin spring is an extra power just because it's $1 spring. I went ahead and I upgraded to a Wilson Combat extended magazine release in this case, just because it's easier to grab. And you'll see it's even a smaller one than on my Les Bear. Or excuse me, a larger one than on my Les Bear because the Les Bear is smaller. But that being said, this gun it's unique in a lot of its ways. So in that particular case, we wanted to make sure that all of the interior moving parts here were going to be a very high quality steel. Now the next part, and it's not so important on a 9mm, but what I have done on this gun is that the slide stop here is made of a tool steel or a forged steel. I'm not entirely sure what it is. This is one by Colt. So, having been made by Colt, a lot of their parts are a little bit better made than, let's say a Rock Island or something like that. And this being a 2020 or 2021 model, the original part probably could have been cast or MIM. I'm not entirely certain. I also used the Colt. This is a Commander style ring hammer. Now you do have to change to a ring style hammer when you go with this Beaver tail grip because the spike hammer or the traditional hammer usually doesn't work. So once that was done, this is a forged piece as well. I like to make sure that these are squared up and then I polish any of the mating surfaces. I did have a different trigger in this a while ago, but I've noticed that I've been able to find some King's Gunwork triggers, and I've installed them on several of my guns. You can actually see I've put 3 of them, and I love the way that these King's Gunwork triggers look, and they're oversized. You actually have to sand them down or put a file on them to get them to fit. Luckily, I have a trigger stirrup that I use to get all of these in good shape. I polish the sides of them. I actually get a stone, a special stone that fits inside of the channel of the trigger, and then I actually stone the inside of that to make sure that that's smooth and that there are no burrs, that there's no burrs on anything like the sear or on the hammer or on any of the parts in which the trigger moves. And so the reason that I do that is if you listen, there's really no sound. There's no like scratching or anything. Now, this trigger is kind of interesting because this is a super long trigger. And then, of course, with the Wilson Combat sear on there, it will have a very, very crisp, but also very soft break. And you can do that with tuning the spring back here. So you have your first very short take up, and then about a 3 to 3.5 pound trigger. I don't have my tool in front of me, but I would say 3 to 3.5 pounds. Now, this hammer is a tiny bit heavier than, let's say, something that you would see on perhaps this gun here that has a Wilson Combat hammer, or let's say this Les Bear that has a very lightweight hammer. And you can see in a gun like this that one of the things that does is that it actually speeds that up. Now, that being said, this is a gun I'd like to carry, so having a tiny bit heavier hammer with the 19-pound mainspring is probably going to increase firing reliability as far as hitting the firing pin. So that's going to be something that you're going to want to consider. If you go too light across the board, you may not be able to have as expected reliability when you use ammo that might have harder primers. So that's something to consider, especially when you start modifying a gun. The next thing that I wanted to do was get a more modern style safety. This is a Wilson Combat Standard Series. This is not a tool steel part, nor is it their bulletproof part. I think I did this mainly for the budget side of it, but I will say because this is a part that really doesn't physically interfere with other parts, I can't see an issue coming up with it in the future. And honestly, I think that it works well with the bulletproof plunger assembly. We do have a little bit more force being exerted on it. I've widened the dimple on the inside of the front of this thumb safety a little tiny bit so that it clicks in and clicks out with a little bit more force, and that it makes a nice sound that's easy to hear, and that is probably not likely to mistakenly be engaged or disengaged. That's something you seriously want to be able to predict, especially when the time comes. So, given all of the parts inside of the gun have been changed to some tool steel, except for the two safeties, which are, I think, investment cast, I believe is what they call them, which is, I don't know if that's MIM or cast. I believe Wilson Combat does cast. That being said, these two parts are not as important to be MIM. You can fight about that all you want. I had somebody attacking me in one of my old videos about how I'm this big proponent of MIM, and I'm not. I'm really a proponent of higher end parts. But that being said, I did every single part of tool steel except for the grip safety in this gun, and parts and everything on this gun have probably gotten over or close to $1,500. In this one, I will give you a total at the end, but it's significantly less. So the next thing that I've done is those terrible sights that were on the gun initially were very difficult to use. The most you can do with the sights like that, since they're barely adjustable if you want to play with the rear GI sight a little bit, but the best you can do is put like a sticker on them. See, I use this sticker like this on my Les Baer because the Les Baer has a blackout front sight, and I like dots, but if you actually see on the Les Baer, it's very nice because it helps you see where that square is going to be. And that's a competition style gun. This is really just a carry style gun. And so what I did on that one is that, I sort of have created a dot, but these are Harrison sights. I'm a big fan of Harrison parts. I will always shill for their stuff because they make good stuff. So in this, these were installed by a gunsmith, and because I wanted it done right, and I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to come loose. And so when you remove the front of one of these Tisas, you actually have to punch it out, and then you have to put in a new sight and then stake it in. So it requires a special tool. I have since bought that tool, and I hopefully plan to learn that myself. These are some, I believe, Amazon wood grips, but they're real wood. They're colored in a nice sort of reddish tone, but I really do enjoy this color. Now, one of the cool things about this Tisas is that when it says model 1911 A1 service, you don't get that ugly Tisas writing that they'll sometimes put something here that will say duty, and they'll have a little lasered on bird, and that the font that they use is Arial font. It is so cheap looking. I wish that they would just use something like this, which is kind of a very kind of military looking font. Now, am I going to fight with you over fonts? No, but it can take a gun that's meant to look really cool and kind of make it a little dorky, which is interesting. So also what I've done is I've checkered the front strap of this. It's far from perfect. Unfortunately, I am learning the art of checkering. I've got checkering files, and it is in constant need of touch-ups with the blue, but that is part of the process of learning to do this with the bluing. But this is, I believe, at if I'm not mistaken, 30 lines per inch. I have one on my Colt that I've done that I think is maybe 20. And this one it's a little rougher, but again, I practice on my own guns. I don't practice on other people's guns. And so I'm learning to do this without having to spend a huge amount of time ruining guns. And if I need to make a correction, I can do it. So this one, a little bit, I think I started with, and then on this one I did second and did the 30 lines per inch, and it does look significantly better. I just spent a lot of time with the files. What's the best way to do it, honestly, is if you really want to have it done, if you don't want to buy the files yourself and learn to do it, there are companies that have a checkering machine that will actually run and make the checkering up and down, and then it will clean it up, and it will be obviously laser straight. If you do it yourself by hand with a file, man, you are in for hours and hours of fun. And then you'll, of course, have to do some blending. I did take a little tiny bit of material out from the underside of this trigger guard. And I mean a tiny bit, as in like, 30 seconds of an inch or something. But just to create the slightest little bit of clearance under there, and then put some blue back on there. Now, this is a Parkerized gun. So when you put blue on top of Parkerizing, you will get a deviance in finish. But again, I'm not trying for this gun to be perfect. What I want is for a gun that is a Tisas gun to act like it's more of a fancy higher end gun. Will they ever be the same? I'm not saying that, so don't put those words in my mouth. But I can at least tell you there's a lot of cool stuff that is happening with this gun. So what we have done. Let's just go ahead and do a summary. This gun started as a $350 gun, but I have turned it into a badass competition style gun. And what I did was I started with a good gun. I went through all of the parts and to make sure that anything that is of lower quality inside the gun, any of the interference parts or any of the actual shock bearing parts are made of tool steel or forged steel. And I've changed out to Colt slide stop and hammer. I have actually cut a Beaver tail into this with a file and then used a Wilson Combat grip safety conversion, Wilson Combat style thumb safety, Wilson Combat bulletproof plunger tube assembly. What I have also done is change out the springs, 19-pound mainspring. I have also changed to a 12-pound spring for the recoil assembly. The recoil assembly is all Wilson Combat bulletproof. When I'm talking about the guide rod, I've done the EGW bushing set that's customized to this. I've done a deep crown on the barrel to take away any of the original Tisas barrel shapes. Harrison sights, front and rear, professionally installed. Wilson Combat bulletproof magazine extender or magazine release. King's Gunworks custom trigger that's been fitted. Of course, I've also done some accurizing on it, including cleaning up the sear, which is a Wilson Combat bulletproof, the disconnector, which is a Wilson Combat bulletproof, using a Wilson Combat sear spring inside, honing the mainspring housing, making sure that I'm honing the trigger guide in this, honing and stoning a lot of the interference parts on here, including squaring up the hammer, squaring up the edges on the sear, and making sure that all those parts have no interference issues, polishing the sides of the trigger bars to make sure that they slide and glide freely and that they will easily be lubricated if necessary, but that they will run quietly without needing to be lubricated. On top of that, I have also done 30 lines per checkering on the front strap of the gun and then done a slight relief cut here underneath the trigger. Overall, this gun is fabulous. It shoots great. It's extremely reliable. I get zero malfunctions with it. And it works best with these Ed Brown magazines. Ed Brown was one of the pioneers of very good and reliable 9mm 1911s. And Ed Brown magazines, at least in my experience, are the best ones. There are ones from Metgar that do come with Tisas that seem to work just fine. The ones from Colt, believe it or not, are the ones that I have the least luck with, and those are the ones that I've actually had some problems with. So, that being said, I wouldn't necessarily buy the ones from Colt. I'd keep the ones from your gun. Some collector will pay you an inordinate amount of money for them at some point. But what I can tell you is that this gun is just all kinds of cool, and it started its life as a cheap GI Tisas. And so, if you have any possible likelihood that you want to start digging into 1911s, Tisas is the best way to go because unlike Rock Island, you do have a forged steel slide, a forged steel frame, and what I would say is at least a mediocre barrel that probably, at least in the 9mm, has a Para/Clark style barrel that you may be able to replace with something like Cart or any of the other higher end barrel companies that make barrels for these, whether it's a Para/Clark cut, but Cart is a good example of one of those. So that being said, this is obviously up for some discussion. If there's any questions that you still have or any specific things that you want to know, I would be more than happy to talk about it. This gun is a labor of love. It's a project. It's obviously something where it's imperfect, but I've had more fun working on this gun than I have any other gun in my entire collection. And I've taken a lot of lessons that I've learned from here, and I've used them for higher end guns and for other things that I have in my collection. And you'll be able to see that I've put in a lot of that same work when putting together guns that are a little bit higher end, including this Colt competition here that I've done most of the same stuff with, but in a stainless with a fancy little rig here, and just more toys. So that being said, I appreciate all of you. If you want to have a discussion in the comments, I'd be happy to do so. But yeah, let's talk Tisas. Let's talk turkey, as they say, and Turkish guns. And if you think that there's anything that you've learned from this, I'd be more than happy to hear about it. I'm only doing this to help. I don't think I have a monetized channel. I smoke cigars on my videos, and therefore YouTube will never ever give me 1 cent. So I appreciate everyone's time. Have a good one.